In the shadows of rock and roll history, there walks a phantom. A voice that never begged for your approval. A spirit that shattered every rule the industry tried to write. For 50 years, one man has stood at the crossroads where art meets rebellion, where compromise goes to die. Neil Young. He fired his band mid-tour, walked away from millions, made albums nobody asked for, refused to explain himself. And through it all, he listened. 10 records, 10 sacred texts, 10 albums that taught him the only lesson that mattered: never bend. Tonight, we unveil the Untouchable 10. The albums that shaped the most uncompromising voice in rock and roll. Number 10, Bringing It All Back Home by Bob Dylan. This was permission to evolve. The folk world erupted in rage. Bob Dylan plugged in his guitar, and the purists called it betrayal. Neil Young called it survival. One side of the album roared with electricity. The other side stayed acoustic and raw. Dylan wasn't choosing between worlds. He was claiming both, refusing to be trapped by anyone's expectations. And in that moment, Young learned the sacred truth that would define his entire career. Growth means losing fans. And that is the price of staying alive as an artist. When they called Dylan a traitor, Young saw a prophet. Someone who understood that standing still is the same as dying. Subterranean homesick blues hit like a manifesto. Fast, furious, packed with words that tumbled over each other. Dylan was not consistent. He was restless. And restlessness, Young understood, was the truest form of honesty. When Neil plugged in years later, when he shifted from folk to grunge to whatever came next, he was following Dylan's blueprint. Never stand still. Never apologize. Evolution is not betrayal. It is survival. Number 9, 40 Greatest Hits by Hank Williams. This was heartbreak as religion. Hank Williams didn't sing songs. He confessed sins. Every note dripped with whiskey and regret. Your cheating heart. I'm so lonesome I could cry. Cold heart. These were not performances. They were wounds open for the world to see. Neil heard that rawness and recognized himself in it. Country music taught him that pain did not need decoration. 3 chords and the truth. That was enough. That was everything. Hank died young, broken, alone in the back of a Cadillac on New Year's Day 1953. But his voice survived, fragile and haunting, echoing through the decades. Young carried that ghost his entire career. When he sang about loneliness, about loss, about roads that led nowhere, he was channeling Hank's honesty, that refusal to pretend everything was fine. Hank Williams proved that vulnerability was not weakness. It was the most dangerous weapon an artist could wield. Neil never forgot that lesson. Number 8, Kinda Blue by Miles Davis. This was the sound of space, released in 1959. Kinda Blue taught Neil something rock musicians rarely understood. Silence matters. Miles Davis did not fill every moment with noise. He let the music breathe. So what? Blue and green. All blues. These tracks moved like fog rolling in. Slow, deliberate, hypnotic. Miles played fewer notes than anyone else and somehow said more. Young listened and heard a different kind of power. Not volume. Not speed. Restraint. Miles knew when to hold back, when to let a single note hang in the air until it became a statement. That patience influenced Neil's guitar solos for decades. The long, sustained notes. The space between phrases. The refusal to rush. Kinda Blue proved that jazz and rock were cousins, that both spoke in feeling, not just sound. Miles taught him that what you do not play is as important as what you do. The silence between the notes carries its own weight, its own meaning. Number 7, Rubber Soul by the Beatles. This was pop music growing a spine. When Rubber Soul arrived in 1965, the Beatles stopped being cute. They started being serious. Norwegian Wood. In my life. Nowhere, man. These were not singles designed to make teenagers scream. They were introspective, melancholic, searching for something deeper. The Beatles had grown up in public, and the world had to catch up. Young heard that shift and recognized it as permission. You could be popular and deep. Commercial and artistic. Those were not opposites. Those were not contradictions. What struck Neil most was the honesty. The Beatles were not hiding behind personas anymore. They were asking real questions. Is this all there is? Where do I belong? What happens when the screaming stops? The acoustic guitars were softer. The lyrics more personal. Rubber Soul felt like a conversation, not a performance. Young absorbed that intimacy completely. When he wrote After the Gold Rush and Harvest, he was channeling that same vulnerability, that same willingness to expose doubt and uncertainty. The Beatles showed him that maturity did not mean losing your audience. It meant trusting them to follow you into darker, deeper waters. Number 6, Blue by Joni Mitchell. This was vulnerability without armor. When Blue dropped in 1971, Joni Mitchell did not hold anything back. Every song felt like reading someone's diary without permission. River, A Case of You, California. These were confessions set to melody. Joni sang about love, loss, loneliness, and doubt, with a rawness that made you look away and lean closer at the same time. Neil heard that fearlessness and recognized a kindred spirit. What moved him most was Joni's refusal to protect herself. She did not write from a distance. She wrote from the wound, with her voice cracking with emotion, her guitar work delicate but precise. Blue was not polished. It was real. And real, Young understood, was the hardest thing to be in an industry built on illusion. When he wrote songs like The Needle and The Damage Done or Old Man, he was following Joni's lead. Strip away the production. Remove the safety net. Stand naked in front of the microphone and tell the truth, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. That took more courage than any guitar solo ever could. Number 5, music from Big Pink by the band. This was Americana reimagined. While everyone else chased cosmic sounds and studio tricks, the band released an album that sounded like it was recorded in a barn, and it changed everything. The Weight, Chest Fever, I Shall Be Released. These songs felt ancient and new at the same time. Rooted in tradition, but pointing toward the future, Neil heard it and found his direction. What struck him most was the simplicity. The band did not need gimmicks. They had stories, harmonies, and a groove that felt like breathing. Robbie Robertson's guitar was understated. Levon Helm's drums were loose and human. Richard Manuel's voice carried ghosts. This was not about showing off. It was about serving the song, letting the music speak for itself without ego getting in the way. Young absorbed that philosophy completely. When he made Harvest and After the Gold Rush, he was chasing that same earthy honesty, that connection to American roots music without irony or pretension. Music from Big Pink proved that roots could be radical, that looking backward could push you forward. Tradition was not a cage. It was a foundation to build something new. Number 4, Exile on Main Street by the Rolling Stones. This was chaos refined into genius. Released in 1972, Exile on Main Street sounded like it was falling apart and somehow stayed standing. Recorded in a French basement during tax exile, the Stones captured lightning and filth in equal measure. Tumbling dice, rocks off, shine a light. Every track felt loose, messy, gloriously imperfect. Neil heard that disorder and found beauty in it. What resonated with him was the authenticity of imperfection. The Stones didn't polish their mistakes. They celebrated them. Vocals buried under guitars, drums stumbling forward, everything bleeding together into one magnificent blur. This wasn't studio precision. This was sweat and instinct captured on tape. Young understood that perfection could kill spirit. Sometimes the best recordings happen when control slips away, when the moment takes over and the players just let it happen. Exile proved that accidents could be sacred, that roughness had its own elegance, its own truth. When Young made Tonight's the Night in Zuma, he chased that same wild energy, unvarnished, unafraid, undeniably alive. Number 3, Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere by Neil Young with Crazy Horse. This was Neil finding his tribe. Released in 1969, Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere wasn't just another record. It was the beginning of a partnership that would define decades. Crazy Horse didn't play tight. They played true. Cinnamon Girl, Down by the River, Cowgirl in the Sand. These tracks sprawled, roared, and refused to quit. Danny Whitten's rhythm guitar locked with Neil's lead in ways that felt telepathic. This was communion through amplification, a conversation without words. What made it untouchable was the complete lack of pretense. Crazy Horse never tried to impress anyone with technical wizardry. They served the feeling, not the technique. Solo stretched past 10 minutes, because that's how long the emotion needed to breathe and expand. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was calculated. When Neil howled through feedback-drenched leads, Crazy Horse held the foundation without flinching. They understood that sometimes music isn't about showing what you can do. It's about showing what you feel, no matter how raw or unpolished that feeling might be. This collaboration proved that the right partners don't make you better. They make you braver. They give you permission to stretch beyond reason, beyond structure, into something primal and necessary. Number 2, Bert Jansch by Bert Jansch. This was the acoustic blueprint. Released in 1965, Bert Jansch's debut arrived with zero fanfare and infinite influence. The Scottish folk guitarist played like his fingers held secrets. Needle of Death, Angie. Strolling Down the Highway. These weren't sing-alongs. They were meditations carved from wood and wire. Neil discovered this record early, and it rewired his approach to the six-string forever. What captivated him was Jansch's darkness. British folk carried shadows that American folk often avoided. Jansch sang about addiction, despair, wandering without destination. His fingerpicking was intricate yet never flashy. Every note served melancholy. Every phrase deepened the ache. Young absorbed that technique and emotional palette completely. When he wrote Helpless or The Needle and the damage done, Jansch's ghost hovered nearby, guiding his fingers, shaping his choices. Bert Jansch proved that an acoustic guitar could be as devastating as any electric weapon. That folk music didn't require cheerfulness or protest anthems. It could just be honest, dark, and utterly human. Neil carried those lessons across every unplugged moment of his career. Jansch showed him that sometimes the quietest records cut the deepest, that you don't need volume to create impact. Number 1. A Love Supreme by John Coltrane. This was transcendence in 4 parts. Released in 1965, A Love Supreme wasn't entertainment. It was a pilgrimage. John Coltrane didn't perform these compositions. He channeled them. Acknowledgement. Resolution. Pursuance. Psalm. This wasn't jazz seeking applause. This was a musician reaching for something beyond language, beyond structure, beyond ego. Young listened and understood that greatness required surrender. What made it untouchable was Coltrane's absolute commitment. He wasn't hedging bets or playing it safe. Every note was offered up as prayer. The saxophone didn't just carry melody. It asked questions that had no answers. It wailed. It searched. It refused to settle for anything less than the divine. Neil heard that spiritual hunger and recognized his own restlessness reflected back at him. Coltrane's willingness to risk everything for artistic vision became Young's compass for life. When critics hated trance or art, Neil didn't retreat. When fans walked out during experimental tours, he kept pushing forward. A Love Supreme taught him that compromise was spiritual death, that artists must follow their vision even into isolation, especially into isolation. This album represented the ultimate standard. Total fearlessness in pursuit of something larger than yourself. Coltrane died chasing transcendence. Young spent his entire career doing the same, not copying the sound, but honoring the search. That made it forever untouchable. Neil Young never played it safe because these 10 albums showed him that safety is surrender. He chased the untouchable his entire life. Not to reach it, but to honor it. Integrity over comfort. Truth over applause. Evolution over stagnation. Some artists bend to the world. Others force the world to bend to them.